You're listening to the Surgeons of Horror podcast.
Hello, welcome to the Surgeons of Horror podcast. Its purpose is to dissect classic films, both old and contemporary new ones as well, all in a vein of horror. This one's a little special one as well that we're going to talk about today because it's celebrating 50 years of its release back in 1968. It's Roman Polanski's Rosemary's Baby, which actually I was just looking up recently, was back in 2010, was voted the number 2 all-time horror films ever made in a Guardian list that was released, as I said, back in 2010. As always, I should introduce myself. I'm your host, Paul Farrell, for these podcasts, and I'm joined by the debonair Nick Alford. Thanks for joining me, Nick. It's always good to have you on board with these discussions. Now, I should, as I do with all the podcasters that join me on our discussions, I do kind of like to throw out that first question of, do you remember the first time you watched this movie, and do you have any stories that kind of couple along with that or not?
My first memories of this film were almost like a chore, which doesn't sound very positive, but when I was, I don't know, early teenager, there was a list of films that would always get talked about, and I knew I had to tick certain ones off my box and tick certain ones off. And Rosemary's Baby was one of them. And I knew it was, a bit older, so I thought, I'm not sure if it's going to be any good, and watched it probably around the same time I saw Suspiria.
Okay.
They feel sort of quite similar to me. But yeah, so that's the sort of first memory I have of just watching it, thinking, I wonder if it's going to be any good, or, just because I've got to watch it, or if it's, one of those films that everyone bangs on about but really isn't up to scratch. Just loved it. I really enjoyed it. I wasn't sure, if I'd be in any rush to watch it again, because it's one of those films that has a massive lead up, twist, and then kind of, that was a big setup. So
that's exactly right. So I wonder that too. So this is a weird thing. You might like this story, but I find it quite amusing. So I don't remember the first time I watched it, but I'm pretty sure it would have been the same kind of thing, where I wanted to kind of just delve into horror, was trying to go through all the classics and tick them off. But the second time I watched it was I was dating an Anglican young lass, and
young lass,
and I was I wanted to record it because it came on like Channel 4 or something. So this is back in the UK when I was living there, and so but I was over at their house, her mum and dad's house at the time, and so I kind of encouraged them to let me record this movie, and then watched it back later that evening
with
at their place. Still, no, they weren't present, but I did watch it with my ex at the time. But I did find it quite, because they were quite devout in their faith, So it was kind of and knowing, because I had watched it before, and knowing what it was about, and I was kind of a bit, I wonder how this will come across. I loved it. No, I don't know. They were she was very mute on the point. I think she just watched it to kind of
appease you.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it's funny because Mia Farrow was quite a devout Catholic as well, so
yeah,
to have her do something like that was pretty extraordinary.
Well, like I think this is what's so compelling about the story. We should probably mention as well that it was based on a novel by Ira Levine, and it came out the year before this film was released. So it was a fast turnaround, and that was the impact that this kind of novel had on the public, because it basically it was one of the first known successful novels to bring horror into the house, into the home. And that's what resonated so much. So Ira Levine, like people that don't know, he wrote Stepford Wives. So he's very much into kind of taking that kind of suburban life and kind of fucking with it, basically, and became kind of a popular author off the back of these kind of novels that he was writing around similar themes. But yeah, so look, it was one of those because it kind of the subject matter of it kind of resonated so deeply that it kind of had a huge impact upon its release, and I think that's why people still kind of hold it high. Critics mainly hold it quite high. And as I said, like in the intro, The Guardian, only back in 2010, had listed as the number 2 kind of best horror film ever made, of all time. So that's quite a feat in itself. So that would have been 40 years after it was made, still have an impact.
Yeah, and there's obviously not much blood and gore and stuff in it, so
No.
It does a good job of staying in that list.
Yeah, that's right. It's this thing is one of the 70s was renowned for kind of those psychological kind of thrillers. It started kind of playing with the mind a lot on screen, and you saw the likes of these kind of movies coming to the fore. I want to say they were intelligent movies, they kind of were these were probably early examples of thinking man's horror. So that in itself kind of made it stand out somewhat as well for the crowd. There's a lot to be said about this film. So I'm kind of rambling a bit, but I think that's probably a good enough intro. We should probably also mention that it was so well received that it had Mia Farrow Oscar nominated, and actually picked up an Academy for Best Supporting Actress from the lady that plays Minnie Castevet, who's called Ruth Gordon.
Yeah, she's great.
So most people would know her or recognise her face because she was in Harold and Maude, which was one of those kind of little indie kind of films that caused traction. Yeah. So yeah, really kind of cool. So we probably should do what we always do. We kind of go through the plot. I don't want to kind of drag our heels too deeply into the plot line, because I do want us to kind of flirt around with it a little bit. But essentially, the premise of this film is that we have a young kind of couple, Rosemary and Guy Woodhouse. Rosemary played by Mia Farrow, as you mentioned, and John Cassavetes, who was a big kind of Broadway actor that was brought into the scene. He plays Guy. I probably should mention here too, in the making of this film. So Roman Polanski is the guy that made this film, and this was his first ever Hollywood production. And he was. There's something quite interesting about the synergy between him and Mia Farrow in this, because Mia Farrow at this point was a relatively unknown, but she was something of an it girl, because she was, creating scenes in Peyton Place, and other than that, she hadn't really done a lot. But she recently married Frank Sinatra, which kind of elevated her into the society a little bit. And the producers really wanted a name attached to this film, and so they were the ones pushing Mia Farrow on Roman Polanski. And he wasn't so keen. He always envisioned Rosemary to be this kind of more voluptuous woman, not so thin, and so he had a different mindset. But it was when he actually met Mia, his opinion changed, and he was like, "Oh, actually, I can see this working."
Yeah, because that was obviously a pretty tough time for her as well, because she was married to Frank Sinatra, and she handed in the script before, when she started it, and he's like, "I can't see you playing this role," and she'd committed to doing a film with him, and because Roman Polanski was so far behind, he was 10 days behind. I think it was after the first 10 days or something. He was already 10 days behind on top of that. So then he said, "Look, it's either, you join this movie, The Detective, with me, and leave the movie, or it's basically me or the movie," and gave her the ultimatum. So she then turned around and said, "Well, look, I'm sticking with the movie." So she was on set, and his Frank Sinatra's lawyer just came in, handed her the divorce papers, and said, "You're no longer Mrs. Sinatra," and that was it.
Wow.
So,
Right.
pretty tough.
It is hard, and that's what I was kind of meaning. Like, so to have that kind of tenacity to stick to your guns and go, no, there's something about this film that to turn your back on. I mean, she's even said like she was young and kind of naive when she went into that relationship with Frank, but anyway, that aside, like to be able to kind of go, there is something about this film. This guy has got something, and it's there is some and like you see her, like it's her film, like it's she lives and breathes the role of Rosemary in this, and it's hard to envisage someone else playing that role. We have seen somebody else playing that role in a remake with Zoe Saldana about 4 years ago or so. I want to say it was.
Was that any good? I haven't seen that one.
I haven't seen it, but I'm being a bit kind of I have to admit being a bit snobbish in the sense that I don't really want to see it.
No, what's the
played
point?
Out anyway. Yeah, and I have done with other things. I will go. I'm willing to watch a remake of something, so I'm not always that way. But I just can't. I can't envisage anyone else but her in it. And it and the other thing, and we will come to talk about the film itself, but the other thing I should just add with Polanski is, as I was kind of about to mention him anyway, but I kind of went more onto Mia. But he was also a bit of a semi kind of unknown. He was known in Europe, but not in America. So it was a bit of a gamble on the producers to even bring him into the project. Like for me, like he recently did a film prior to this called Repulsion, and that I will always have up and usually drifting around my top 10 of horror films. I love that film so much, and the reason I mention it is the film deals a lot with agoraphobia, and as the movie goes on, you feel more and more kind of claustrophobic within this lady's apartment, that the walls are physically moving in on her. It's echoed somewhat with Rosemary's Baby because you see most of the film is centered within their apartment space, and it has got this kind of claustrophobic feel, especially when all that kind of comes out with the occult that starts coming into it, and you realise that she's not as safe as she once thought she was. Your home is supposed to be your safe place, and this was definitely not it. It was invaded to the nth degree.
Especially when you're so vulnerable and pregnant as well, especially being so vulnerable.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I agree. That's something that was interesting too. And it's been played a lot on since, like the idea of the vulnerability. I mean, with when they're pregnant, it's been used a lot in horror films. You have seen it, or we have seen it more recently in A Quiet Place. With Emily Blunt's character who's heavily pregnant, almost about to give birth, and they are kind of being attacked from external forces. So that whole kind of sense of protecting and protection and vulnerability is a real strong one, and I think a lot of people identify with that in movies in general, not just horror. So let's kind of take a quick look at the plot line then, as it were. So as I said, Rosemary and Guy are the leads in this, and you've got to bear in mind that, as I said, at the offset, it is filmed and released was in 1968, and it is very much of that time period. You can't really shift outside of that.
Especially the wardrobe and the set and everything like that. Because
yeah.
The location's amazing, but obviously the house, the flat, is all a set. And
yes,
because they couldn't find anything they really, that met the sort of gothic description or his vision of what he was after. So it's just an amazing location.
Oh yeah, completely. They did really well with that. The whole, the set looks great. It does have that kind of authenticity to it. but as I said, it's very much within that kind of late 60s period. But the reason I mention it is because the timing of it too. You know, they are a young couple. They're trying to make ends meet. They kind of seem to have lucked out with finding this beautiful apartment in a building complex. But there is kind of like it's a price they can afford, which is interesting in itself. That they can. There's something about that. If you know about the events that transpire after the fact, then there's something kind of about the alignment that comes into play with them kind of finding this place. But they kind of get the place, and this should be added too that Guy is a struggling actor. He's trying to kind of make ends meet, but he's starting to make a little bit of a ripple. He's good enough to be recognised, but it's one of those things where he just hasn't had that opportunity arise, that one stroke of luck to kind of get him up the next rung of the ladder. But they believe that they can kind of afford this place, and they kind of move in. And so they at some point they've got a friend of theirs, her friend called Hutch. Who's an elderly guy, and he actually kind of, when he hears of them moving into the place, he kind of starts. He's the boogeyman. He's not the boogeyman. He's the one that is the prophecy of doom. You see it a lot in horror films, Crazy Ralph in Friday the 13th, as an example. He's the one that's, in a more subtle version of him, obviously. Yeah. He's not like, oh, you're all doomed. But he does kind of mention how, there was lots of deaths that have occurred within those buildings, and hints of the occult from or satanic rituals taking place. But they kind of bless you.
Sorry.
That's all right. I should be the one doing that. But they kind of scoff over it, and or sweep it under the carpet. Only later do they realise that they should have taken heed to his warnings. Interesting as well. Rosemary then meets this young girl called Terry, who's she meets her down in there's like a basement area where they do the laundry. It's a shared kind of laundry area within the apartment, and she's a recovering drug addict, and she kind of mentions how she's living with an elderly couple called Minnie and Roman Cassavetes, and they basically took her under her wing. Rosemary does notice in this conversation how Terry is wearing one of those pendants, like a necklace, and she kind of says that it was given to her by the Cassavetes. Rosemary does notice it has a bit of a strange smell. Then we kind of cut to a Guy and Rosemary returning home one evening, and they find that Terry has apparently thrown herself to her death out of this window.
Yeah, that was dark.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me. There's a very famous photo of a woman who committed suicide and landed on the roof of a car. And you see the photographer has taken a photo of it from above, and you just see the impact of the caved in kind of chrome metal around her in
like
her
a crater sort of
lifeless
thing.
form. Yeah, it's a pretty it's a pretty haunting image, and this kind of shot almost reminded me of it in a way. I don't know which came first of the two, but it did kind of strike me when I saw that. A very haunting image too, and then this is also where we meet the Cassavetes for the first time, as they turn up, because the police have kind of cordoned off the area, and it's interesting. Their first. What's your impression of when we first see Minnie and Roman?
Well, she's always given me the creeps, and that's not really fair, because I'm sure she's a lovely lady and very professional, and always unnerved me. And I think because I saw this before I saw Harold and Maude, and she was great in
Okay.
that and
Yeah.
lovely, and she had this amazing character. And watching her in this, she's always just done. I think because she's so domineering, and she's so nosy, and she's on top of
Yes.
everything, and because Mia, it's just
Yeah.
the polar opposites. Because Mia's so fragile, and this woman's just bursting with confidence. It's so awkward. You're like, she's going to do anything she asks almost, and Mia doesn't want to. I say Mia,
Yes.
sorry, Rosemary, I should say. um, Mia's character.
That's all right.
Um, she doesn't want to be rude. She's all about being polite, and
No.
I think what this film loves doing is respecting your elders, and
Yes.
treating them with a certain amount of respect. So, because she would, without skipping too far ahead, the way she walks into Rosemary's flat and just with her friend, and they both start, crocheting or whatever on her sofa, as though it were
There's
her
this
own
kind
home.
of cadence that they bring with them, isn't there? This air of superiority. It's
Yeah.
almost, and that's what I mean. Is like the invasive thing starts happening before you're really aware that it's happening within this movie, which I think is very well kind of played.
But she's also, as well as being scary, they're both kind of almost comic relief as well because of the way they play it.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, that's right.
unsettling, awkward sort of, okay.
Well, because she's like, I mean, they even laugh it off too, don't they? Guy and Rosemary kind of, they treat them as this old bumbling couple.
Yeah.
The sinister feeling that that you get with this couple, that when it starts to kind of come out who they are and their background as it unfolds, it's gets under your skin in a massive way. What was I going to say about her too, though? Oh, yeah, she's a New Yorker though too. Like her accent's this thick, drawling kind of New York accent, and it's that kind of carefree attitude that New Yorkers have, which she brings to the plate as well, which I think kind of adds to the genuine kind of portrayal that she brings to the character. Because the other guy, the guy that plays Roman, is a lot more. He feels like Eastern European. He's got this kind of very Christopher Lee-like presence in his stature, and very kind of speaks with like a very kind of regal kind of voice, which is a weird juxtaposition to his wife Minnie. I found when I was watching it.
Yeah, it's good contrast, isn't it?
Yeah. So it was an interesting, and so when they arrived at the crime scene, he's very kind of matter of fact about it, and no real connection to her. Whereas with Minnie, she kind of almost feigns it, is this kind of, she would never do that, and then when she comes, but then is kind of still walks up to kind of see for herself what's happened. It's this whole like, I still need to see the aftermath of this.
Yeah, it's pretty grim.
yeah. But it, like, weirdly, out of the result of this is their Rosemary's and Guy's first interaction with Minnie and Ramon, and off the back of it, they start forming a bit of an unlikely friendship, and they this is, if this wasn't weird enough, right, to kind of give you a bit of what the fuck moment, Minnie actually gives Terry's pendant to Rosemary, and says it's a good luck charm.
Yeah, that's ridiculous, isn't it?
yeah. You're like, I don't think it was that lucky.
Like, I think that was done with a bit of tongue in cheek, but it's
yeah,
it's great.
But like, following their interaction, then suddenly Guy finds out that he has kind of landed a role in a play, because the actor, he was down to 2, loses the audition to this other actor, but finds out this other actor has suddenly gone blind out of the blue, and no idea why it's happened, or how it's happened, and so he kind of ends up getting this kind of big role, and it's also at this point where Guy, who has been reluctant before about having kids, starts suggesting having a baby with Rosemary. much to her delight because she's been kind of really wanted to have a kid. But yeah, so Guy does start changing a little bit here. He's becoming a lot more confident and a bit more braggish in his behaviour. But they do decide that they want to kind of try for this baby, and they, on the night of conception, Minnie then turns up with these 2 individual cups of chocolate mousse, and it's when they accept it, obviously, think it's a bit odd, but they start to eat it. But Rosemary kind of notices that it's got a funny aftertaste. But then Guy kind of again has this kind of real braggish approach and very flippant with her, and just kind of he guilts her into eating it, but like she doesn't. She pretends to, and then she eats some of it, and then kind of chucks the rest into a napkin and throws it away without him realizing. Unfortunately, though, as she suspects there was something in the concoction, and she's been drugged, and she's still consumed enough to kind of not pass her out completely. She kind of ends up in this kind of half catatonic state, doesn't she? Where she kind of keeps drifting in and out of consciousness. And this is one of my favorite, even though it's fucked up. This is one of my favorite moments in the film, because there's some weird kind of use of imagery that kind of unfolds within this moment.
Because for me, what's clever about it, and I think it's obviously intentional by Roman Polanski, is the fact that you're never really 100% sure if it's a dream or if it's actually happening.
Yes, that's right.
I think that's obviously what's terrifying for her, is she doesn't know what's going on, and this is when she wakes up with the scratch marks, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So then he deliberately said he didn't want to make the scratch marks too prominent.
Yes.
To feature them too, because even the audience is not sure if it's could have been her or something else. So I think the way it keeps you guessing is pretty clever.
Yeah, that's right. Because even then we don't really know what's happened. I mean, like, just to say exactly what happened, she's raped by a demonic presence in front of Guy, and the other Branford tenants, and they're all naked at the time too. So that's actually kind of what has happened. But as you said, it's done in a way where we're kind of unsure of what's happening. It's almost got like a bit of a Salvador Dali kind of feel to the way it moves, and is quite abstract in the visuals that we see.
Yeah, it's very surreal.
And so when she does wake, as you said, she's got these scratches on her body. It's a little unclear as to whether it's her. I mean, Guy insinuates it's him, saying he had long nails, and quite rightly she's a bit like, hold on, so what? Are you telling me we had sex last night while I was unconscious? And he's like, yeah, I didn't want to wake you. I didn't want to pass up the opportunity for us to conceive.
Yeah, there's a name for people like that.
Yeah, Donald Trump.
Or Bill Cosby.
Bill Cosby. Yeah, exactly. Oh, yeah, so it's all a bit... it's probably the most difficult bit when you realise, it's really hard to... I don't know why she stays with him. It's just like a real, anyway.
Yeah, because I think, again, it's that... I think she's just so fragile, and so it seems like she's new to the world, basically. And again, it's like, oh, maybe that's normal. Maybe that's what people do. Or I think she's still just trying to understand everything. And
it's true. You're hitting something for me there. It's almost like she's the one being reborn through this too. Because, and we'll get to why I say that statement at the end of the plot line, but. Yeah, we'll put a pin in that because I might bring that back up. But yeah, so look, she's obviously kind of a bit bewildered by his actions, as you would be, but even more so when she actually finds out that she is pregnant as well. So it's interesting. As she plans to kind of get this care from the local doctor or friend of the family doctor. But the Cassavetes kind of, when they hear, like, that's the other thing too. Like, the first thing Guy does is go and tell the Cassavetes the news.
Yeah, like they're his family or something, and
Yeah,
he's always had this real distant relationship with them, and then suddenly it's like, oh wow, I've got to tell you.
Yeah, that's right. So very odd. But anyway, so the Cassavetes come over, and they're the ones that recommend one of their good friends, Dr. Abraham Saperstein. And she also starts kind of making Rosemary like these daily health drinks as well at this point.
Yeah.
I should mention also that Dr. Saperstein is played by Ralph Bellamy. For me, he will always be Trading Places. He's been in countless other things, but that to me is who he is. He's very good in this too. I have to add. Throws in a very kind of subtle performance. So then we kind of then. So for the first 3 months of her pregnancy, like Rosemary kind of has these real severe pains. She starts to lose a lot of weight, and she looks really sick. She gets very pale, and she starts like. There's a scene where she kind of eats raw meat. She gets a steak. She kind of puts it on, flips it really quickly, and then just eats it.
Well, apparently she did eat raw liver, according to the internet.
I heard that, and she was a vegan as well. I think from memory, from what I read.
So they say.
Yeah. Anyway, but yeah, it was made to kind of eat it anyway. But yeah, then this weird thing happens with so Hutch comes to visit. So just a reminder, Hutch is like the elderly guy that kind of gave the forewarning of doom about their actions of moving into the apartments. He comes and pays her a visit, and he's the first person to kind of say, "You look fucked."
As people do,
Yeah.
Especially when you're pregnant,
right.
People love being told that.
Yeah, that's right. And she's just like, she kind of washed it away, just saying, no, it's meant to happen, and and he kind of notices the pendant as well, and the smell, and she says it's tannis root, and he's like, that's strange. I've never heard of that. He's one of these people. He's one of those elderly scholars that will go off and look it up for sure.
Can't Google
and he does. Yeah, that's right. Can't Google it. Don't exist, mate. So he pulls down one of his huge encyclopedias. But he then there's a point where Roman just turns up out of the blue to kind of during Hutch's visit, and he's a bit suspicious of Hutch, and likewise Hutch of him. And then he kind of visits under the feign of, I'm going to go to the shops to buy some groceries for Minnie. And anyway, it's clearly a rouge. And then he disappears, and then not long after, Guy suddenly turns up. He's still got his makeup on from a shoot he's been in, and he's just like, oh, it's okay. We're between takes. They have rewrites or something. It's all a bit sus. And then Hutch kind of ends up going, and then we find out like a few months later, Hutch has gone into a coma. He goes into a coma that night. Sorry, yeah. Which is all a bit kind of sus. And but a few months later, Hutch dies. We learn, but before he dies, he manages to briefly regain consciousness enough to tell his daughter that she has to give Rosemary a book about witchcraft. And not only that, it's got an anagram in it from a name.
Yeah.
So we find this out at the funeral, because when Rosemary goes to the funeral, the lady kind of gives her the book and says exactly what we just said. Rosemary kind of, she has a bit of a detective's hat moment.
Gets the old Scrabble out.
Yeah, a bit of a word boggle, and then kind of she's kind of thinking it's to do with the name of the author and the name of the book or something, didn't she, at first?
Yeah.
But then she kind of realizes that it might be to do with the name of the subject, the guy in it called Stephen Mercado, who actually was the son of one of the guys who lived in the apartment blocks, who was accused of being a Satanist. And when she plays a bit of Countdown Conundrum, she finds out that Stephen Mercado is an anagram of Roman Castevet. So alarm bells start going off. So she starts suspecting that her elderly neighbours and the doctor are part of a Satanist group with designs for her baby, and somehow, unbelievably to her, is that Guy must be working with him in some way, perhaps to kind of advance his acting career, because obviously that started to go gangbusters after her pregnancy.
Funny that.
Yeah, that's right. So she then goes to share her suspicions with the doctor who was recommended by her friend, and he just assumes she's delusional, and he ends up calling her actual doctor, who turns up along with Guy, and basically just say, like, if she cooperates, then they won't harm her or a baby. She then they escort her back to the apartment. She tries to do a bit of a runner back into her apartment, like via the lift, to kind of get ahead of them. And she locks everything, but then she starts going into labour, and then somehow they've entered the apartment without her realising, and they manage to kind of pin her down basically and give her an injection and sedate her.
No chocolate mousse this time, Ryan.
No chocolate mousse this time. Just straight to the veins. So look, she then kind of wakes up, doesn't she? That's right. So I'm just trying to remember. Sorry for the pause. So she kind of wakes up. She's had the baby.
Yes. And
the other elderly women folk are kind of looking after her. Guy's kind of there. She's asking if the baby's okay. I think he originally says it's okay, but then he kind of lets slip that the baby died, and that it's. But she kind of doesn't believe that story, but kind of goes along with it anyway. But then she kind of starts to hearing like a baby crying, like almost as if it's next door or something. And when she asks Guy about it, he kind of says, "Oh, there's a new couple that's moved in and they have a baby," which all seems a bit too kind of too good to be true. Yeah, that's right. But then she then kind of she drugs the switches the drugs with the that she's supposed to be taking, that's kind of keeps putting her to sleep, that she's been told to take under duress, but she manages to slip it into some tea that the lady that's her warden, for want of a better word. So she waits till that lady has passed out, and then she kind of goes to kind of look for where it's coming, where the baby's crying is coming from. At which point she finds that in her hall closet there is a secret door which leads into the Cassavet's apartment. This doesn't just come out of the blue. It is alluded to right at the very beginning of the film when they go and view the apartment, that at some point it must have been a connecting door. That's not,
Yeah.
Not so Narnia. She follows. Yeah, like not Narnia. Yeah. Ooh, Aslan. That's a bit of a weird connection too. Sorry, just a massive digression. So what I mean by that is that we're talking about Rosemary's Baby, which is to do with the devil and Satan, and
Yeah, of
The Lion,
course.
Witch, and the Wardrobe is a Christian
yeah.
story. Anyway, as an aside, so she goes through this doorway, the closet, and she starts seeing pictures on the wall that then has flashbacks to when she was the night she was that she conceived, and so things start kind of resonating with her. That at some point she must have been lifted into this room, and so then she eventually kind of comes into this room where everyone's kind of congregated around, all the tenants of the building, including the doctor, and they're kind of around this. She can see like this crib, black crib, in the corner.
That thing's horrifying, isn't it?
It is a very horrifying image of a crib. I have to admit, it's a pretty. Or not even. Is it a crib or is it a pram? It's kind of a pram, isn't it?
It looks like a pram. I think it's a crib because
Yeah,
they're rocking it and everything, and
of course.
that's what's just. I watched this when I was a lot younger and didn't have kids or anything, and even then to see someone taking ownership of your child,
Yes.
and just the way she's swinging that thing, and
Yes.
then she's not allowed near it, and then
No,
the old
that's
dude
right.
says no, let her in, and the best part is like the old dear sticks her tongue out. Like she's it's like the roles are reversed. She's suddenly become the
Absolutely.
child. Because these older people seem to have so much life and virility, it's probably through what they do, and it just makes me angry just seeing someone claiming something like that's not theirs. They've got no right to it.
Yeah. Oh no, I completely agree. It's this kind of, again, it's this attitude that they all have. This kind of self-righteous kind of belief that and ownership over the baby too. That it is their baby in a way, not Rosemary's. But yeah, there's this. I really like this moment too, though. Like, I mean, you do get the infamous reaction that Rosemary has when she eventually gets up to the baby, but the fact that you never see the baby, is a stroke of genius, and it was a deliberate move on Polanski's part.
Yeah.
But you walking up, and as Rosemary walks up to the baby, like they kind of let her kind of come up to, because she's saying like, you're not. Oh no, sorry, that's before that. So she walks up to kind of look at it, and the horrified look on her face is one that it haunts me even still. It's probably the one of the most memorable images from that film. Still not quite sure how she managed to tap into that horror that she kind of embodies with her reaction. I know I did see in a documentary that they did walk through that several times or rehearse that moment, so they would have had it down to perfection. But it's that moment where it's like, she quite rightly reacts to it in a sickening way. It's like, what have you done to him? What's wrong with his eyes?
Yeah.
And so, and I can't remember if it's Roman or the doctor that says he has his father's eyes.
Yes, I love that's an amazing line, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, I love it. And then, she's like, but they're nothing like guys. So she still hasn't kind of cottoned on at this point quite what's happened. And this comes to like, the point there as well where, it's revealed that Guy's not the true father, and, that this is the son of the devil, essentially. But this coming back to what you're saying about the ownership of the baby too, they've even named it. They said his name's Adrian.
Yeah.
So it's, and she's Roman at this point, almost takes on like this grandfather role and just like urging her to become a mother to her son, as the other women are too old. And Guy comes up to try and kind of calm her down, but she does she spit in his face? She doesn't. She spits in his face because
I think so,
he's like even saying like, they're going to be generously rewarded and they can have another child that will be properly theirs. What the fuck?
I mean, that's a bonus, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh man.
Is that the same as in the book?
Yeah. It's like the book, like, it is very close to the book. I have to admit, there's not a lot of changes that take place. Is quite faithful to the story that unfolds. Yeah. So like anyway, so we get to the conclusion of the film where, you know, Rosemary's watching one of the elderly women kind of viciously rocking this baby to try and calm it down, and
don't.
Rosemary then kind of gets up to kind of say, like, you're doing it wrong. You know, he doesn't like it like that. And then she kind of comes over, and the woman's kind of originally like, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't know what you're talking about. But Roman almost convinces the other lady to step aside and let Rosemary come in because she is the mother.
Yeah, that's it.
And he lets her. You know, she picks up the baby, and then gently starts to rock it, and then you see a small smile kind of creep on her face, and that's when it ends quite abruptly. What was your impact on, you know, that final shot?
For me, it was kind of like trying to work out if she really has accepted it, or if she's thought, you know, I'm just going to jump out the window with this thing, if you like, you know, or you still, even though she's smiling, you still don't quite know what's going on. And I love that, you know. Usually ambiguous endings tend to annoy me sometimes, you know. It depends how it's done. If it's, you know, I don't need everything spelled out, but at least if you've sat through a big build-up and there's a twist, you almost want to know, oh, wow, she's joining them, or, you know. I think the way it was done was superb. But I'd always wonder in my mind, like, you know, would she embrace it, you know, because I think... Again, she spent the whole time not wanting to be rude and, you know, not really sticking up for herself too much. But does she then go along with it, or has she learnt along her journey? And I think leaving that for us to decide is great. And it's also the incredible part about it is, again, what would you do in her situation? You know, it's still your son. It's all new to you. Can you just turn away from something like that, and then is it your responsibility to stop it? Or, you know, do you want to see where this goes? Hey, being Mary to the devil's spawn, you know.
Yeah, that's right. Well, it's
Rosemary.
Rosemary, that's it. Look, you tapped into something unwittingly then, and I'm only kind of the more learned in this situation because I read the book. But interestingly, right at the end, there's a moment where she thinks to herself, I could jump out the window with this baby and end it all right now.
Yeah.
But to backtrack a little bit too, there's a bit more kind of that comes out about her past, and that she's from a very religious family, and she has shied away. So she's Catholic upbringing and has a big family that are all Catholic too, but Guy's Protestant.
Right.
And so she steps away from her faith to be with him.
Mm-hmm.
And right at the very end, as she's kind of contemplating that she could end it all by throwing herself and the baby out this window and ending it all, there's a part of her that goes, wait a minute though. Sure, he's the son of the devil, but he's also her son. So it means there's half of her in him.
So he's not all bad.
So he's not all bad, is her thing. And she's almost trying to persuade herself that rather than end a life, she may actually be able to turn things around and bring him up to be good.
Yeah.
Maybe, just maybe.
Good luck with
and
that.
And it kind of it just leaves it hanging with that. So you don't actually know what her final decision is, but it's almost like she's accepting that she may be able to turn things around. And I think that's what's in the smile at the end that Farrow gives.
How about you, mate? What was your take on it? I mean, you know, the book aside.
Yeah, so I only read the book recently prior to the podcast, so my immediate reaction when I first watched it, I was quite horrified with this, and I remember thinking, how could you accept it? You know, if if I was her, I would, at the time, I would have gone, no. You know, I wouldn't accept it. But I think the thing is, and I don't know whether you'd appreciate this too, but when you become a parent, it becomes a definitely different thing. You start to understand things there that it's not just black and white like that. You can't just go, I'm going to end this baby's life.
Yeah.
For the sake of mankind, because it's your baby.
Yeah, you still don't really get a clear image into what their end game is, because you don't know if there is any real power, or if they have done this before, and you know, there are kids who've grown up and nothing much has happened, or if this is the be all and end all. I mean, I think they obviously they mention it, you know, about him being the son and it's going to take over the world or whatever. But I don't know. Is that just the ramblings of a loony?
Yeah, but that's the thing. That's what's so. I think that's what's so good about it. It's almost like, you know, just to bring another classic into the equation, The Wicker Man.
Oh yeah, the bees.
And the way, and the way I'm. Not that one.
I was hoping you'd say that.
The original. Yeah, but oh god. But what's interesting about that movie and the climax of it is that we don't actually know what the result of their actions means. And it's a beautiful tipping point between good and evil, Christianity and paganism. Where we don't actually, we don't know the outcome. So Lord Summerall is prophesying that the sacrifice will bring fruit next year, and you know, Sergeant Howie's death-defying screams at the end is kind of saying that, you know, that won't be the case. The crops will fail. You know, and you don't know the outcome of that. You don't know what will they do if the crops fail again. You know, or will they succeed? You don't, and that's. I just think good horror films should always leave you on that kind of knife point. You know, you just don't know which way it's going to fall.
Yeah, because the witch kind of, I wasn't really a fan of that, but the way that ended, I felt like it just didn't fit the film. Like it gave you, I won't spoil it, but you know, it spent the whole movie setting a great tone, and then just kind of went
that ending. Like, I know what you mean. The last 2-3 minutes is a very different beast to the rest of the film.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah, again, without spoiling it for those who haven't seen it yet. So what are your final thoughts on the film itself before we kind of, you know, talk about any other things we want to add to it? Like, what was your feeling of the whole film, or when you've reviewed it? You said it's been a while since you've last seen it, but just talking it through now, is there anything that kind of springs to mind that you want to discuss?
Even talking about it with you, I still just get that unsettling feel, the same feeling I got from Suspiria, is that lack of control and being surrounded by people who don't have your best intentions at heart, and they have an agenda that you're not involved in, but you have no say in. You're obviously involved in it.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just really unsettling. And I think the fact that everyone else is so much older in the apartment block, that's obviously done deliberately. I'm not sure if that's the same thing in the book, but Roman Polanski, when he cast sorry.
No, it is. Yeah, sorry to talk over you. It is the same. Yeah,
because when Roman Polanski was casting it, he actually drew how he wanted each of those older people to look, and then they matched it to his drawings. And I think that's I don't know if that's trying to say something about the young and the old at the time, and you know that it was the 60s and the rebellion, and
that's true. There's a lot there. Yeah.
But for me, it's just that the thought of also the betrayal as well, of someone, you know, she's married. They're married, right?
Yeah, they're married, yeah.
So, that betrayal on someone she's married, you know, it's such a massive betrayal for something
Yeah.
really trivial, to be honest, to furthering your career like that. For the sake of the child. But yeah, it's still I still think it's definitely worth a watch if you haven't seen it. And on the whole, yeah, it's a great film. Not even as just a horror film, because I still don't. Yeah, it is a horror film, but it doesn't feel like a slash horror sort of slasher movies or anything like that.
No, it's definitely not. It's not. It's not your blood and guts kind of horror piece. It's very much a psychological horror. I mean, we've just had it almost feels like there's a new wave of this coming back as well, like Hereditary coming out just recently, and no spoilers again, but has that kind of very 70s kind of feel to it, in style. And it feels, and like with the remake of Suspiria that's coming out, we've been both talking about Suspiria in our discussions today. The trailer that was released does kind of lend weight to this kind of the same kind of feel again. So it's almost like we're going back to this kind of, as I said, this kind of almost this 70s horror kind of feel with films. I still don't know what I feel about the remake though that's coming out, because Suspiria is one of my it is always in my top 10 horror film list. There's so many ingredients in that film impact me in so many good ways.
Yeah.
But
that's the thing. Sorry, without drifting off subject too much,
No.
Is with the Suspiria, it does feel very 70s, and it does feel It's done. It's interesting. I think I'm going to watch it just for the techniques on how they make it look of the time.
Yeah.
But the fact they're doing it like that is interesting, but it's also redundant. Like if you're just trying to make like making Psycho, remaking Psycho, shot for shot. Like, what's the point?
Yeah, exactly. Don't get me started on that one.
Yeah.
So if I'm going to have a criticism about Rosemary's Baby, and it's one that is it might be a bit controversial, because I also feel it in a lot of Polanski's work, and that's not to say I don't like Polanski, because I actually enjoy his films. Because I feel it in Chinatown, for example, which was I think that was the film he followed up with after this one.
Yeah.
Is the pace of his films are incredibly slow.
Yes.
And you'd be forgiven to kind of fall into a bit of a narcotic state with it sometimes, that you kind of almost drift in and out if you're not too careful. And you find
4
yourself
hours originally. The
really?
he sat with the editor and they got it down to 4 hours, and he's like, "Yeah,
Wow.
you're really going to have to cut this down now."
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting, because I just find because it just, and I think modern audiences will struggle, I think, with the pace of this film.
Yeah, definitely
because of that. And but I do come from someone that does enjoy when a camera hangs in shot that little bit too long to make it feel like the room has presence.
Yeah, and you get that from the trailer. If you've watched the trailer is dull. It's really boring.
Yeah.
It's a really hard watch. It doesn't sell the movie.
No.
And it's just these lingering shots, and it's a hard watch considering it's only 3 minutes long.
Yeah, right. Is that right? Okay, I'll have to review that one again. But yeah, like as I said, it's my only criticism of Polanski is that I fully expect, as I said, modern day audiences to kind of balk at it when if they like us, when become horror fans, and they like go, I want to tick off those boxes and watch all those classics, and they dig out Rosemary's Baby. I can imagine a lot of them will go, "What the fuck? It's boring. Boring's batshit, mate."
Yeah, you've got to be in the right frame of mind to know you're going to sit through something that's not.
Yeah.
Like you don't just put on 2001 on a Friday night when you're having popcorn and pizza.
Oh my god, 2001 I watched again in with the same family. They ran a little church shop, and my ex was supervising one day, and I just went into the back room and watched watched 2001.
Oh dear.
Great days. But yeah. But yeah, you're right. Look, they it's one of these things that as beautifully shot as 2000, and we are going off on tangents. I apologize. But I guess this is part of the cinephile in me. So yes, I do this podcast about horror, but I am a lover of film in general. And I know 2001 is this beautifully shot film, but man, is it hard slog to get through it.
Yeah.
It's painful as fuck.
Yeah, when I was at uni, I had my collection of VHS tapes, and my flatmates were like, we want to put on a movie, and I was just like, oh, you got 2001. They actually, I think they asked me, and I was like, yeah, just help yourself to whatever. And they're like, yeah, you said you had good movies, and I was like, yeah, and it's like, oh, we watched 2001, and we were bored shitless, and I'm like, yeah, you probably weren't in the mood for it at the right time,
Yeah. That's the thing. These films, essentially, what we're coming down to, are not Sunday afternoon viewing material. Because you're Sunday afternoon, you're kicking back, you're relaxing, and you are in that kind of sleepy state anyway. It's the end of a weekend. It's not the right time to watch them.
When is?
I don't know. Good Saturday morning, maybe. There's not late night viewing either. Like I know I'm narrowing that kind of field of viewing potential for these films, but late night viewing is not too good. They look. These are the sort of movies that I loved watching when I was sick, though. Do you know what I mean? There's something about when you're you're like, I just want to watch something. I'm not going anywhere. I'm just gonna be sitting in bed anyway. I'm not feeling too good, and then you kind of end up being quite absorbed into the film as a result. It's not a great recommendation, is it? Watch it when you're sick. But there you go. I sound like I'm scathing of Rosemary's Baby, but I'm not. I have to admit, I'm not. There are moments in this film that is haunting. I think Polanski and the casting directors and the producers put together a fine ensemble for this film that all complement each other and make this film sing as a result.
Yeah, because it was going to be Robert Redford originally.
Yeah, and he turned it down.
Yeah.
And they were trying to get Jack Nicholson in as well, I think, at some point.
I think it's good because, you don't want anyone dominating someone so fragile. I mean, you did, sorry. With the way it was played, the husband character, I think if you had somewhat a big presence, then that would have overshadowed everything. But I think the fact that you feel that they're on the same kind of journey, even though he's obviously not, he's obviously done what he's done, is more interesting.
I agree, and that was Polanski all the way that pushed for John Cassavetes to be that role, because I get, it's never said, but I get the feeling that he lost out in the casting of Mia. I don't think that was his number one choice. He was happy to go along with it because she showed him something in the auditions that he didn't expect. There was a spark.
That's it. It was Robert Evans' choice, I think, as far as I know. And with John Cassavetes, because he's a director as well, there was a real conflict on set between him and Polanski, and they it didn't go too well between those two at all.
Which is interesting too, isn't it? But then I guess that makes... do you know, like, as well, watching this, you kind of feel that he should have been bigger than he was, no? As an actor.
Yes. Yeah, or at least as memorable, to stand the test of time. Yeah,
but that didn't happen.
No.
There you go.
One of those things, just the actors that Hollywood forgot.
Yes, exactly. I think just before we kind of close out our discussions, there was I do want to mention that there was a sequel made of this film.
Really?
Are you aware of that? Yeah.
I was wondering that when we were sort of talking about the ending there, and I thought, would they really bother? Like that's
yeah. It was called "Look What Happened to Rosemary's Baby."
oh, that sounds like. Please tell me it was made before Look Who's Talking.
Yeah, it came out in 1976. So yeah. Look who's talking now. Rosemary's Baby. Look, it was a made-for-television horror film, essentially. The only returning star was actually Ruth Gordon.
Oh right.
As Minnie, reprising her role. Interestingly, the lady that played Rosemary was Patty Duke, who actually lost out in the auditions for the original film. Oh. I did watch it. I think that's what I'm going to say on it.
Oh, okay, right. It's a brutal review.
Yeah, it's pretty shit, and it didn't need to happen. You know, I only watched it purely to kind of see if there was anything to add, or did they mention it, or you know. But it's kind of broken into 3 sections essentially. They call it the Book of Rosemary, the Book of Adrian, and the Book of Andrew, and it's kind of like different chapters within it, and it's about the son of Rosemary kind of trying to come to terms with the fact that he's also the son of Satan. It's just it's a bit shit. But I do want to add that there was a sequel to the novel written by Ira Levine as well, which was called Son of Rosemary. Which I haven't read, but kind of goes along a very similar kind of, similar kind of storyline, in that it's, we're cutting to when he's a bit older and Rosemary's in it still this time, she's in the bulk of the film at this point, but it does play on the whole kind of, for me, which is a bit of a cop out. There's a bit, or is it? It could be clever, but it could be a cop out. But essentially, like, the climax of the book, and this is a spoiler for everyone, sorry, but it is. But the climax of the film is basically like as they're approaching the new millennium, a deadly virus is unleashed and it destroys all human life. At which point Satan returns to Earth and he drags Rosemary to hell. Then this is where I was meaning about the cop-out bit, right? Or is it? Because she then wakes up and it's 1965. Oh. She's still married to Guy Woodhouse. And it's moments it's before all of the events have occurred. And so is it a dream that she's had all along? So even the first book, was it a dream? And so when she goes to visit Hutch with Guy, he kind of mentions about the stuff to do with the house, and then she realizes, hold on, was it a premonition all along?
Yeah, God.
That she had, and was the dream a warning? People have argued though that it wasn't a dream, that whole sequence where she wakes up again. And that when she's dragged off to hell by Satan, when she wakes up in 1965, it's purgatory that she's in. So she's kind of reliving the same kind of cycle over and over again.
Oh, God.
I don't know. Clutching at straws, I feel. So it kind of, I guess my point is that sometimes things are best left untouched. And to let kind of those classics kind of be as they are, classic, there's always this desire to recreate what was in the original, but they are classics for a reason. They're lightning and bottle moments, and sometimes you can never recreate that again. There are exceptions to the rule, but they are very small.
Yeah, definitely.
So cool, man. I think that's probably it, unless there's anything else you'd like to add.
No, well, one thing you did mention was that Rosemary was in it a lot, in the book a lot, and that reminded me of that. She's actually almost in every scene, pretty much, in the movie.
Yeah.
And I think that's a Roman Polanski thing as well, because it's the same with Repulsion, is that, that's pretty much focused around
love that film.
the same central character as well. So,
Yeah.
that was interesting. You don't really see that nowadays, where it's just one character really featuring so heavily.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. I mean, I guess it takes a lot for have one character carry a movie like that. It has happened, but you're right. It's not often that it does occur. So in that sense, it's quite refreshing. And I think that to me is like, I don't know if Mia Farrow ever matched her performance in this movie in any of her following performances in her other movies. Like, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but could you name anything that? I'm not saying she didn't star in great movies, by the way. I'm just saying, were there any in those movies? Did she ever
have that same kind
anything?
of performance?
Yeah.
It's a really.
She was obviously heavily involved with Woody Allen and was in a lot of his movies too. So people may kind of will think of her with those movies in mind. But if, like me, you hate fucking Woody Allen, then then it doesn't at all. It doesn't register with me. But I do like. There is a really good Agatha Christie film that she was in called Death on the Nile, and I do remember she was really good in that. And you got to remember that she was in Supergirl as well. Come on.
No, I don't remember, but I'll take your word for it.
She's Supergirl's mum at the beginning. Doing the whole Marlon Brando kind of shtick, essentially.
Allura,
yeah.
Wow.
But yeah, like, do you know what I mean? I don't think if you were to take out all the Woody Allen films, because she was in a lot of them.
Yeah.
She I don't know. Like, to me, she will always be remembered as
definitely
as Rosemary Woodhouse.
Definitely.
Yeah. Cool. All right, man. Well, I think that's it for us. As always, it's an absolute pleasure to chat with you,
too, mate.
On these. And until next time. In fact, actually, I'm going to give a hit. I am going to mention the next movie off the ranks following this one. Hopefully. Is going to be Piranha, Joe Dante's film, which also celebrates 40 years this year. So there's been a lot of big celebrations this year, and we've got Halloween coming up as well with 40 years, and Invasion of the Body Snatchers also celebrates 40 years. The Donald Sutherland flick.
Oh wow!
So there's a few big wins out there. So. Do stick around if you like listening to us, and send in your comments about Rosemary's Baby or anything that you'd want us to talk about on Piranha as well. If you've got any thoughts on that before we hit the record button and chat around that one. But until next time, as I said, I'm your lead host as always, Paul Farrell, and joining me was Nick Alford.
Pleasure, mate.
Take it easy.
See ya.
Goodbye.
Bye.
You're listening to the Surgeons of Horror podcast. Music supplied by Peter Nezik. For more discussions or podcasts, head over to surgeonsofhorror.com or head over to our Facebook and Twitter sites for the latest news and updates.